I'm Jeff Ratcliffe for the Pro Football Focus Fantasy Slam. It's March, and that means the NFL's new year is upon us. Now, when there's a new year, there, of course, is free agency. And this year's free agency got started with a bang. A number of offensive linemen signed almost immediately. And within the first couple days, we saw that safeties got paid. It seems like the league is moving towards that Seattle Seahawks model of big, strong, fast safeties who can play all over the field. That's the way the league's going. It's a copycat league, and hey, it was successful for the Seahawks. So safeties, they got paid this year. We can't necessarily say the same thing about running backs. It wasn't a hot market for running backs this year. And in fact, if we look to the running backs, very likely the top running back on the market this year was Ben Tate. And what's interesting is Tate wasn't the first running back signed. We saw Donald Brown go to the Chargers before. We saw Jennings go to the Giants. Darren McFadden re-upped with the Raiders. Even Toby Gerhart signed with the Jaguars, while Tate did not sign yet. Now, he ultimately landed with the Browns, and there was potential of some concerns over Tate's injury history. But let's face it, these moves have a significant impact on the fantasy landscape for 2014. So let's take a closer look at each one of these. And right off the bat, we have Tate going to Cleveland, a rebuilding team under new head coach McFadden, and they have Kyle Shanahan in at offensive coordinator. This means a zone blocking scheme, which is exactly what Tate has come from in the past, and we know Tate can excel. He doesn't have a lot of wiggle to his game, but he is a one-cut-and-go guy, and he can get up to speed pretty quickly. So Tate really is situated pretty well in Cleveland. It is Cleveland. The offense may not be up to snuff this season, but Tate should still offer back-end RB2 value. Now, Jennings going to the Giants. We saw Jennings in really putting up impressive numbers last year in place of the often injured Darren McFadden. I'll get to him in a minute. Jennings is an interesting case, and it looks like he'll be given every opportunity to take this job and run with it. Now, we have seen Tom Coughlin in the past split the load between his running backs, so the likelihood of him being anything more than a back-end RB2 is really not there. I'd be much more comfortable in the RB3 range with Jennings. Now, Gerhart's sort of interesting as well because he is the type of running back who can take on a full workload. And so does he get 300 plus touches in Jacksonville? If he does, I mean, it's really going to be hard to keep him out of that argument for RB2 status. The likelihood of that, though, I'm still a little bit reluctant to buy into it. There is some talk, but we still have to see what the Jags do going forward here. But Gerhart is in a nice position to have fantasy value. Donald Brown joining the Chargers sort of muddies the situation in San Diego, though the Chargers have come out and said Ryan Matthews is still their bell cow. So Matthews, at least on paper now, it looks like his role won't be impacted that much, though it's really unlikely he puts up the RB1, back-end RB1 numbers we saw out of him last season just because of the presence of Brown there. Now, McFadden. If you're a McFadden believer over the last couple years, I feel your pain. I've been there right with you. And the problem with McFadden, we know very well, is he just can't stay on the field. He's still young enough, and honestly, he hasn't had a lot of tread off the tires because of all the time he's missed. But re-upping with the Raiders doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense for McFadden, and it doesn't really do much for his fantasy value. Again, if you've believed in him in the past, you know owning McFadden is playing with fire. The last significant running back move during free agency that could impact the landscape, and certainly will impact the fantasy landscape, is Darren Sproles being traded to Philadelphia. Sproles' presence in Philadelphia is going to be a multi-dimensional one. It's not like he's a running back per se. He's an offensive weapon type, so he's not going to eat in too much to LeSean McCoy's touches in general. And hey, McCoy had over 360 touches last year, so if he loses a couple, he's still not going to lose any significant fantasy value. He's still an RB1. Sproles, on the other hand, the way he's going to be used as more of a receiver out of the backfield, a slot receiver moving all around the formations, he's not going to have much value in standard fantasy leagues. But in PPR leagues, you are going to want to keep an eye on him. He will make for an RB3 in those formats because he's going to get some targets. So these are some key situations you're going to want to keep an eye on as we move through this offseason at the running back position. For Pro Football Focus, I'm Jeff Ratcliffe.